Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Caution, High Voltage Sales Opportunities You're Missing. It's sponsored by HawkSearch by Bridgeline, and I'm Jim Lucy, Editor-in-Chief of Electrical Wholesaling at Endeavor Business Media. I'll be your moderator today. Before we get started, let me explain how you can participate in today's presentation. If you have any technical difficulties, please submit the question to the questions window and our technical experts will help you out. We recommend disabling any pop-up blocking software or extensions in your browser, as these issues can cause issues with the webinar player. Additionally, we welcome your questions during today's event, and we will answer as many questions as possible during the Q&A session that will follow the main presentation. But do feel free to send your questions in at any time. To do so, simply type your questions into the question window on the side of your screen and hit the submit button. Also, please be aware that today's session is being recorded and it'll be available on Electrical Wholesaling's website, www.ewweb, within the 24 hours. You'll be notified by email when the archived edition of this webcast is available. Now I'd like to introduce you to today's speaker, Jonathan Meyer. He's a Senior Solution Engineer for HawkSearch by Bridgeline. He's been working in the search, navigation, and recommendations world for over 8 years. He's got a focus on solving enterprise-level problems in this space, and I think you'll enjoy his presentation today. Jonathan, over to you.
Well, thank you very much for that wonderful introduction there, Jim. Looking forward to going through and covering some great information here. Always happy to talk to the EW crowd here, and looking forward to showing you some really cool sales opportunities that we think a lot of the B2B environment, especially electrical distribution, are missing out on. So really do appreciate the time, and let me run through some topics here. So let's get started. So we have our I hope you're ready for puns. Let me put it that way here. We're very big on puns on this presentation. Your high voltage sales opportunities you're missing. Let's go ahead and dive into it. I am Jonathan Meyer, as Jim was just covering there. I've been in the search space. I've been actually working for HawkSearch for 8 years. Been in the search space for close to a decade now, so I have lots of experience, lots of knowledge that I'm happy to share and to cover for you guys today. I am a Senior Solutions Engineer for the HawkSearch by Bridgeline product here. So there are dangerous connections missing in your site conversion strategy. Most likely. Let's go ahead and say that some of these you might be doing. We're pretty confident there's some areas that you are probably aware of, but we want to make sure that you know how you can solve for those. We're going to show you different strategies and how you can solve for those. Lots of good topics that we're going to cover today. And so what do we hope that you take away from this? Well, we want you to be able to understand how you can leverage AI to convert buyers across the globe. Really, that is one of the key things, that kind of globe there at the end. We want to make sure that we understand that entitlements is something that is going to be a pain point when it comes to search, being able to treat those properly. We want you to be able to understand how you can increase your average order value by over 20%. That's really going to be leaning into a lot of the recommendations functionality that we're going to cover for you guys today, running through several different strategies on how you can approach using recommendations to help get to that average order value over 20%. And being able to drive traffic to the right products for purchases with entitlements, and also with some additional relevancy functionality you can take advantage of. So making sure that you're understanding how visitors are searching for your products and making sure that they're getting to those products in an accurate way. So let's go ahead and dive into one of those first things there, the unit of measurement searches. So when we were just talking about that last slide there in terms of functionality that you can expect to help improve your visitors getting towards the right products, well, one of the things that you can do for that is understanding how a visitor searches on unit of measurements. I can probably guarantee that most everyone here on this call has gone to their site, competitor sites, other sites while they're doing your own personal shopping, and put in that you're looking for something like a 2-foot metal stool, as you can see here in this kind of graphic on the left, and you're getting no results found. Where in reality, if you had simply searched on 24 inches metal stool, you would have gotten back in results here. Now, as human beings, we understand the relationship between 2 feet and 24 inches to be the same thing. So when we're doing a search, while the product might say, hey, this is 24 inches, in your head, you might be searching for 2 feet. As a search, that is typically a stumbling block, where if someone was to not search specifically on the exact unit of measurement as it's entered, you're going to get that no results found experience. The solution is, of course, to be able to search for a 2-foot metal stool and still find those 24-inch metal stools that were in the data. The good thing on our end here is that we have solved for this. So this is probably going to be the most salesy approach that you're going to hear in this presentation, but it is something that you guys should be aware of in terms of understanding the pain points that your visitors are going to be experiencing while searching through your site. And so we want to make sure that you're aware of how we can solve for that. So to that end, while we always love presentations and these PowerPoints, we're always very big also on giving you guys the proof is in the pudding, live site demonstrations of how this is actually being solved for in a real world environment. And so couldn't think of a better example to show you than on Crescent Electric. They are, of course, a HawkSearch client, and they're taking advantage of one of our functionalities that we call the SIM, the Search Information Management Tool, that solves for that unit of measurement conversion pain point. So let's start with an example here. Let's go ahead and jump up to their search box, and let's say that I am looking for a 6-inch PVC end cap. Of course, I'm typing it in. We're getting that nice autocomplete, all standard kind of search functionality there. We're going to pull back in our results here. And you can see that when I've done that unit of measurement search of 6-inch, double quotation as the abbreviation there for inch, we're getting back in 4 results for that. Now, if we look at the results themselves, though, you're going to be able to see that there are some differences in the product catalog. So one of the main pain points that we see in this space when we're thinking about missed opportunities for sales, opportunities where you can help increase that experience, improve the user experience on your site, is this idea of not just understanding how a visitor is searching, but also understanding the differences in your data that you might have. So looking at this product listing here, we've got 4 results. We have a 6-inch PVC end cap with the 6 being, so the inch, I'm sorry, being entered in as a double quotation. We have another product with a 6 double quotation, meaning inch, PVC end cap. But then we have another product down here, 6 INCH. So we're already seeing some differences. This is stored as double quotation to mean inch. This is spelled out as INCH to mean inch. And then we've got a third variation, 6 INCHES. So there's these 3 variations on how the product data says we've got 6 inches. And then you also have to account for how the visitor might search on this. Now, using the SIM, the Search Information Management Tool within HawkSearch, we have this ability to do this kind of pattern recognition and to understand what those values might mean. To say that if I search for 6 INCHES PVC end cap, we're going to go ahead and get the same 4 results as if I had searched for 6 double quotation. You'll notice that even though I've typed in INCHES in this example here, we're not just matching against the one result that has INCHES, we're still matching against INCH as well as double quotation. Another example would be to say, I'm looking for 6IN PVC end cap. And I'm going to go ahead and put that as one kind of word there where it's all bunched together. There's no space between 6 and INCH or INCH. Yes, we're putting that together as one word, and we're getting back in the same 4 results. The reason that we're able to do this is to understand the patterns that unit of measurements are being commonly submitted in and understand what those unit of measurements are in your data. So that when searching in this example here of 6IN and then finding the relevant match against that in the product catalog. Now, the cool thing here is that in the past, if you were going to solve for this, this was something that you needed to build a big library of like synonyms or thesaurus entries. You needed to maybe stuff the product data to say, okay, in the data, the vendor might be sending this to us as 6 double quotation, but we know that visitors also search as 6IN, 6INCH, 6INCHES, 6IN is one word. You had to kind of account for all that variation. You had to kind of build out really stuff your product catalog. This is all done programmatically. This is all done using pattern recognition. And to really kind of drive that point home, let's get a little crazy here. Let's say, another common pain point that we see when it comes to search relevancy and making sure that you're getting the right products in front of your visitors when doing a search is being able to search against a fraction. Let's say I'm looking for a 1/2 foot PVC end cap. Now, the neat thing here, we're going to go ahead and execute that search. And we're going to go ahead and pull back in our results. And it's the same 4 results, even though that we have now gone from a whole number to a fraction. We've now gone from inches to a foot. This tool understands, again, that pattern recognition, that within a foot, there are 12 inches. So if I'm looking for 1/2 of a foot, that's going to be 6 inches. So let's go ahead and find the relevant products that match against that. Really just kind of keeps this very easy for, regardless of how your product data is stored, regardless of how a visitor might be searching on that information, they can go ahead and find that very easily. Last example I'll give you here. Let's go ahead and just kind of finish the round here. Let's use a decimal point. Well, let's say I'm looking for 0.5 foot PVC end cap. And again, go ahead and execute that search. And you should not be surprised at this point, but it's going to be the same 4 results. So really something to think about, something you want to look at your site, understand how are you solving for this. Maybe you're not going to use the SIM, which is fine, but how are you able to solve for this pain point? Because this is going to be a really big stumbling block of how visitors are coming to your site in this electrical distribution space. searching on unit of measurements and not finding the relevant product they're looking for because your data doesn't match or you don't have the right synonym relationship built out. So one of the main things that we want to make sure that you're taking away from that is that functionality. There's an opportunity for you to help improve the experience. One of the other things that we want to make sure you're aware of, and another kind of pain point that we see in that last kind of overview that we presented there of how to get the right products in front of your visitors. It's not just the search functionality. It's also making sure that they're able to navigate to the right piece of product they're looking for. So we see this very commonly in, again, that unit of measurement example where we might have several different values that are kind of arranged just numerically, but it's not arranged in a standard value that you would think of. This is a list of lengths in imperial, so obviously inches here, and you can see that we're starting with 12 inches, then we're going to 15 inches, then we're going all the way back down to 3.94 inches, and then we're counting back up. So this is not progressing in a standard kind of way that you would think. Similarly, you look at something like another example of the variance in that data, how that data is being stored. So let's say we have, to go back to that stool example here, we can have stool seating height, stool seating width, stool seating depth, but then we also have stool seat height, which is basically the same thing as stool seating height, but it's because the data is stored differently. It's disjointed. The one vendor might be giving us stool seating height as the value. Another one might be saying stool seat height. We're just dropping that ing there in that value, but it means it's a whole nother range of values that we need to support. And also you can see here that we're using terminology of short, counter, bar versus 15 to 19, 20 to 29. So there's lots of this kind of pain points that we see in, I've done a search, I'm getting back in the results maybe that I'm looking for, but I need to dig a little bit deeper into them. So I'm going to use the facets, the filters, the left-hand navigation options to find what I'm specifically looking for. And here you can see that can be difficult with these kind of presentation pain points here. So how can we solve for them? Again, we have that sim functionality where we're able to take the information, use that pattern recognition to really kind of clean up some of this and present it in a much more streamlined fashion. Again, this can be handled maybe through more data-driven approaches if you're not looking to use another tool like HawkSearch, but something that you should be aware of as a thing to look at to help improve your user experience. Opportunities for missed sales is, well, once I've gotten back in my product set, am I actually able to find what I'm looking for? And how difficult is that? So again, let's give you a live example here. Now for this one, we're going to go ahead and jump into a slightly different environment here. Let's go ahead and jump over to one of the other clients that we'd like to highlight here who's doing this, restockit.com. Another B2B environment. They're in the kind of office supply space, janitorial equipment, selling lots of different products like that. As a quick example of what we're talking about here, I'm going to do two searches to demonstrate this functionality from a facet and filter left-hand navigation experience. Let's go ahead and say that I'm looking for, let's continue that craziness. Let's say I'm looking for a half-foot paper plate. Again, no one's going to actually search on that value. You'd be a mad person to do so, but the sim understands that. We're going to go ahead and obviously pull back in the 6 inches there for those particular products. Again, using that unit of measurement conversion. But what I really want to highlight here, let's actually take a look over here in the left-hand navigation. You'll notice that we have this value of units per case. We've got 21 to 50 per case, 100 to 500, 500 to 1,000, different values there per case. Now, what I want to show you, though, is that if we actually hover over this product listing here, you can see in the little hover box that what this data is actually telling us is that this product is the vendor is telling them, well, there's 1,000 per carton, or 1,000/carton, 1,000 over carton. Some other values, what we're going to see here, this is 20 per pack. This other value, if we continue to scroll over here, well, this is 125 over a pack. This one might be 1,000 per carton. Another value, if we look up here, well, we're going to have 100 packs, and there's 10 packs per carton. There's 100 plates per pack, 10 packs per. Just very confusing to look at that. But you'll notice that from a fasting and navigation perspective, there's not all that disparity that we just saw in the examples that we had in the slide deck there. This is all standardized. So there's only one option. There's only one value. Because if we think about this being 1,000 per carton versus 100 plates per pack and 10 packs per carton, which again equals 1,000, it all means the same thing. And there's a pattern that can be recognized here that we can use to help streamline this and make this a lot more navigable to your visitors. So I can then say, well, I am looking for 100 to 500 per case. We'll make that facet selection. We'll go ahead and refine within that. And you can see that within these products, this is listing as a 125 over a pack. Well, again, that still meets that unit per case value that we're seeing there. Another example of how you can standardize that data and make it a much more cleaner experience so a visitor can navigate specifically what they're looking for, regardless of how inconsistent or how disjointed your data might be. Go ahead and do another search up here. Say I'm looking for some foaming soap. Pull back in our results here for this. Now, in addition to the examples that we just showed you there in terms of cases versus cartons versus all of that, we're still using that exact example here on the units per case for this search. But something else that I want to highlight for you is if you look at something like the capacity of this particular bottle that we're getting here. Well, this is listed in milliliters. This is 1,000 milliliters. Meanwhile, they have other products that will have this listed as 1,250 milliliters. Meanwhile, this is being listed as 7.5 ounces and not milliliters, so fluid ounces versus milliliters. There's other products in here, like I believe this one here is listed as 1 GAL as a gallon, an abbreviation for gallon. So again, a lot of disjointed data inconsistencies and how that unit of measurement is being treated. But also, they wanted to standardize that from the Facet Navigation perspective and bring that over to the capacity volumes that, as a US-based company, most of their visitors are going to be looking for this in. So that, most of their visitors are not looking for, I'm looking for a 1,250 milliliter bottle. They're looking for a 64 fluid ounce bottle. So being able to use that unit of measurement conversion, not just for a fasting perspective to say, or not just from a search perspective, but again, to also standardize that from a fasting perspective to say, if you're looking for, let's actually do 64 fluid ounces to 1 gallon here, because I can show you a couple other examples here. We make that fasting selection. We're, of course, then going to go ahead and understand that conversion from imperial to metric, understand that falls within a range, be able to clean that up so that as a facet, you're not seeing milliliters, you're not seeing flat fluid ounces. It's all standardized into one value. And also understanding those abbreviations like we're seeing here of 1 GAL versus gallon. So something to keep in mind. Again, we have tools to help kind of improve this, do this a little bit more programmatically, understanding the patterns. Again, we call this the SIM to make this a little bit more streamlined, less work on your guys' end to clean all this up. But this is something that regardless of what you're looking at as a tool, this is something to be aware of. Look at your data, understand how are you presenting those navigation options to your visitors to improve that experience. If they're doing that unit of measurement search, are they seeing the right set of results? If they're then getting their set of results back in, how are they able to navigate through that and filter through those results? Are there too many different options that don't make sense? Is the order of those not in the right values that you would anticipate? You want to make sure that those are clean experiences so that a visitor can get directly to what they're looking for as painlessly as possible. Excellent. So let's go ahead and move on to the next topic then here. That's going to be recommendations. So one of the things that we do try and highlight and really strive to communicate to our clients, and really just as a general kind of thing to take away, knowledge point, kind of something to look at to improve your experience, improve that average order values, to leverage things like recommendations for your visitor experiences here. So let's go ahead and give you some examples there. So what do we mean by this? It's being able to say that, when someone's doing leveraging that data to find the product they're looking for here. So be able to say, I'm looking for this example here of using AI and machine learning to get the recommendations for the right product. So leveraging things like the wisdom of the crowd to understand, even personalization here to say, you may also like, you're looking at this particular product. We know based off of the purchases that you've made in the past, here are some other things that you might like. Using wisdom of the content, so understanding the product detail information to make suggestions for recommended accessories and similar items to what I'm currently looking at. So let's give you an example here. We didn't want to spend too much time on the slide deck for this one because this is something that you can really clearly understand when we start getting into practical demonstrations for that. And for this, we want to go ahead and show you Berlin packaging. Now, again, this is functionality that we're talking about from the HawkSearch end, but this can be strategies and ideas that you can take back into really, whatever your approach is for recommendations, some ideas that you want to keep in mind when thinking about how this all comes together. So here we're looking at Berlin packaging. They sell containers, jars, bottles, that kind of thing there. And they're going to be going ahead and leveraging that first idea, wisdom of the crowd. That idea of, what's popular? What are other people looking at? What's trending on my site? Using that idea of taking advantage of all of the different signals that a recommendations tool can track on your site. So, Joe Smith has done this search, navigated this product, purchased this product, added it to his cart. Susan has been on the site here. She's been looking for these other items. using all of those different signals, out of every visitor that comes to your site to be able to say, well, what's actually popular, what's trending on your site, using that wisdom of the crowd to make those suggestions here. And so then you can use this as a good kind of first introduction to your site. You've got a broad product catalog, you're in a lot of different industries, you service a lot of different kind of segmentations. I might only think that you carry a certain line of products. When I come to the site, being able to do something like this of trending items can give a visitor to your site a good overview of kind of everything that you're currently offering. What are other visitors getting from this site? What's actually popular on this? And again, you think about this from the perspective of the lift that you have. This is all being informed through machine learning. This is all automated, basically. We're taking those signals around you can take those signals, I should say, around what your visitors are doing on your site and use that to automatically make these suggestions, generate these lists of here are the items that are actually trending on your site. Really great example of that kind of wisdom of the crowd approach, and also a good kind of best practice to put this kind of functionality front and center when someone first comes to the site, give them a good overview of the product catalog that you carry. So what would be the next step down on that functionality? Well, let's go into an actual product detail page. This is one of the approaches that we like to call the wisdom of the content. So we have the wisdom of the crowd, which is taking advantage of everyone else's signals and interactions to generate kind of a, hey, here's what everyone else thinks is important on your site. Wisdom of the content is taking advantage of all that product detail that you have around your catalog and being able to use that information to make important and intelligent suggestions using recommendations and machine learning. So an example that we have here on Berlin Packaging, you think about the content, the wisdom of the content we have here. Well, we know what the size of this product is. It's 8 ounces. We know what the material of this product is. Well, it's clear PET plastic. We know what the style of this product is. Well, it's a straight-sided jar. We also know the cap is not included. It's listed right there on the product. But we also know what the cap size is. It's another piece of data. It's another content piece that we have access to. So using all of this content, you can use that wisdom of the content to make intelligent suggestions for recommendations here. So what do we mean by that? Well, if you look over here at the accessories that are currently rotating through over here on the side, we're using the wisdom of the content to inform and make the relevant suggestions that we're seeing here. So if you see here, we've got this straight-sided jar. The cap is not included. Well, the cap size is 70 to 400. Well, what are the things that we're suggesting over here? Other caps that are 70 to 400. So they're matching the content of this page to make relevant suggestions for that. We know the cap is not included, so we're going to go ahead and make suggestions for the caps. Well, caps have specific sizes. I can't just show any particular cap that I think might, that is trending, that kind of the wisdom of the crowd approach here. They need to be specific suggestions for that particular bottle. If I'm looking at a 12-ounce bottle, the cap might be different than an 8-ounce bottle. If I'm looking at this particular product, I might need different accessories for that. Use the information that you have, the content that you have around that to inform and make those relationships more automatic. In the past, this would be something that was handled by a product manager, making those relationships and say, oh, well, if I'm looking at this item, we got to show them these, 6 other items. I need to make that relationship in the PIM. I need to, get that into the tool, into our CMS to make sure it's making those suggestions. We can do this a lot more programmatically using that machine learning, understanding what that wisdom of the content is to make these relevant suggestions using those pieces of information. Similarly, another piece of information that you can use is all of the other pieces of data that we were just talking about. What's the size? What's the style? What's the material that it's made out of, to make suggestions for similar items. So a very common experience on a product detail page is that a visitor might not actually be at the point of making the purchase. They're doing some research. They're looking to find, what are my options that are available for me? Being able to leverage things like comparing similar items, which again takes that wisdom of the content, knows what the product is that I'm currently looking at, and makes suggestions for, in this case, other clear PET plastic straight-sided jars, but different sizes, as we can see here. Using those signals, again, this is not something that a product manager needed to build out. We're just taking advantage of the data points that we have from this content to make those suggestions. So again, a strategy that you can take back to your tooling there is to take advantage of those pieces of data and really look at how you can help solve for that and build that out automatically. One other thing that you can see here, though, is that we're also doing multiple recommendations. So another great strategy is really you just want to kind of get as much in front of the visitor as you can. So we've got our accessories right up here at the top on the right, really calling attention to that, the most common kind of thing that you would get. But, I might want to scroll further in, get information about this product. I'm looking at maybe some of the other details around it. Well, then you can hit them again with those recommended accessories. And then when we're getting down to the bottom, this is a common place to leverage this because As the visitor gets further and further into the experience, the more they're communicating to you that they're not ready to actually make a purchase, that they are doing that research and investigation there. So we've had kind of the wisdom of the crowd, taking advantage of what are all the signals to drive things like customers also bought, trending items. We've had the wisdom of the content to make suggestions automatically for similar products, accessories. Well, what's another example that we can do here? Well, the wisdom of you, personalization. So let's go ahead and say here that I'm looking for an aluminum. Let's actually, let's do, yeah. Go ahead and pull back in the results there for that. So we're going to pull back in the results for that particular keyword search. Again, relevancy we can dive into, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But when we get down here towards the bottom, we want to talk about that wisdom of you, the personalization. So taking advantage of, well, you're going to know a lot about your visitors on the site. Take advantage of those signals on an individual level. We were talking earlier about Susan, who's been browsing the site and looking at these products and adding products to cart and making purchases. Well, not only can you use those signals for the wisdom of the crowd to say, hey, here's what, if I then come onto the site and I'm looking at a product, here's what Susan bought, to make suggestions for me using that information. But you know that Susan's browsing the site. So go ahead and use that information to drive very specific suggestions for Susan, making those suggestions to say, here are the recently viewed items on an individual level. If Jim was to come onto the site here and browse, he's not going to see the same recently viewed items because this is personalized for me. This is a great way to really help increase those average order values, because you're re-engaging with the visitor. As we're doing that kind of research and navigation, as I'm maybe coming back to the site, I'm always just kind of buying the same thing. I'm basically just doing reorders every time. Recently viewed items, recently purchased items. These are great strategies that you can personalize to not only increase kind of the stickiness of your site. Berlin Packaging, they know who I am. They know who I am. They know what my needs are. They're going to go ahead and make those same suggestions for me. Leverage that wisdom of you, the personalization strategies, to help increase those average order values. So that's a bunch of information there, but let's move on to the next topic then. So moving on from that, one of the things that we really wanted to make sure that we're kind of highlighting here is entitlements. And there's the next few sections are going to cover this. And entitlements go by several different names. There's lots of different kind of ways to think about that, but really it's kind of that segmentation, customer grouping, company logins. It's all of that kind of information. So you want to make sure that you're understanding the entitlements of your visitors and leveraging that to kind of improve the experience for them. So let's give an example here. What do we mean? Well, here we can say that I'm Susan Smith. I work in the HVAC industry. I'm in the Seattle, Washington area, and I prefer the Allen Bradley brand name. It's kind of what I always go to. Well, the search should understand that. Your experience on the site should really be able to take advantage of those signals, that it's the HVAC industry, that it's Susan Smith who's browsing, she's in the Seattle, Washington area, and that she's got a preference for a particular brand name. So how can we do that? You really want to understand that customer login and location. So here you can see that we're honoring that it's Susan who's browsing the site. We also know the location that she's currently browsing from when doing that search. So let's give you a live site example for that there. And for this one, we're going to go ahead and move over to another electrical supply company. Again, we have a lot of experience in this space. This is one of the reasons why we're able to think about and drive these kind of presentations, because we've thought a lot about, well, what makes sense for, what are the gaps that we see in the B2B electrical distribution space around user experiences when it comes to search, comes to recommendations, comes to this kind of customer entitlements. So let's give you that example here in a live site. We're going to show you Kirby Risk, and let's do that same search for sensor. Go ahead and pull back in our results for that. Now you can see that when I'm doing the search for sensors, we're going to go ahead and pull back in the results here. And you can see that, I am not currently logged in, but we are understanding the pickup branch here, that this is part of the, we're getting the sign in to see your pricing, but we are then also getting the pickup branch information here. And we're seeing the results driven against this. So in the example that we we're just talking about, Susan Smith from Seattle, Washington, who prefers Allen Bradley. Well, that, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware of, with Allen Bradley and Rockwell Automation, there can be different agreements in terms of where things are, available. You can sell it at this location, but not at this location. We've got territory breakdowns and region breakdowns and just kind of product availability as well, which we'll also dig a little bit deeper into. So in the example that we have here of Kirby Risk, we're looking at the Indianapolis Distribution Center. We've got our search for sensors pulling back in 5,000 plus results for that. But if we take a look over here in the Facet Navigation, you're going to notice that the majority of these are all from that Allen Bradley brand name. 4,691 results are being returned from that particular brand for this location. So what do we mean by that customer login and location as an entitlement? Well, using that information to make sure that the right products are being displayed using those signals. So in the example here, let's go ahead and change our location. Let's say the pickup branch isn't going to be Indianapolis, it's going to be Fort Wayne, Indiana. Let's go ahead and change that. We make that change. And when we make that change, you're going to notice then that our results have now gone from 5,000 results to 500 results. And that's specifically because of that location. So we're using that customer entitlement to make sure that the right results are being returned. This is something that you guys can keep in mind, something you can check on your sites. If you've got different pickup branches, you've got different entitlements like this, make sure that, kind of verify that you're meeting these goals here. This is a gap that you can identify and can solve for. Because if I was shopping at the Fort Wayne, Indiana location, the reason that we're getting this disparity in results here, 500 results, is because the Allen Bradley brand is not available at this location. I can even try and do a quick search here for that within the brand name Facet. You'll see it's just not available. So that's an entitlement. That's honoring the location that I'm currently shopping at to make sure that the products that are only available there are the only ones that I'm seeing. Let's move on to the next level of entitlement that we see there, pricing groups. So again, another really common thing that we see around the experiences of, how is a visitor pulling back in this information. It's not just the ability to say, oh, well, we know where you're at, but we know who you are. And we know what that experience is going to be here. So you can see we've got welcome Steve and we've got welcome Susan over here on the right. Well, Steve has prices of $61.99, $82.99, and $97.99. Meanwhile, Susan has the same set of products, different pricing for those groups there. Where you can see here in this regard, we've got pricing for $65.99 instead of $61.99, $86.99 instead of $82.99, and $99.99 versus $97.99. So using those signals to understand what actually are the relevant pricing for that particular visitor. Being able to make sure that you're showing that information for them. So if we go ahead and jump back out to the live site here, let's go ahead and log in. You can see some of that as we're going ahead, and I'll just log into our test account here. And then within the pricing that we're now getting back in return for that, you can see that the pricing for these searches are going to be dependent on what I'm logged in as. So I'm now logged in as our test account here. And so the pricing that we're seeing is now dependent on that. Whereas before we had that little kind of disclaimer up in the left-hand corner that said, make sure you're logging in to see the pricing that is available for you as an individual user. So using that information to say, let's go ahead and have that be returned. Now, from an entitlement perspective, this can get fairly complex. We've seen this where it can be, one-to-one, where, John Smith is logged in and he's got a contract negotiated price, whereas Susan Smith is logged in and she's got a separate contract negotiated price. So one product might be, 5 cents cheaper for John and 5 cents more expensive for Susan, and you've got millions of customers. Well, at that point, then the entitlement usually doesn't make sense to have stored in a search perspective. It usually makes sense to have that stored in your ERP, your PIM, wherever that other information is being managed, that kind of logic around that customer specific pricing. The thing that you want to be looking for, though, is making sure that when someone is doing those searches, that you're able to take that pricing information and pull that back in for them, so that they are able to see that pricing results when we're talking about that. When we get into smaller segments, when we're thinking about kind of specific companies that are being logged in, different groups and larger segments, that can be information that makes sense maybe then to have stored within a search tool to pull that back in. So kind of regardless of how you slice that information here, you want to make sure that you are getting back in the relevant pricing. It really kind of comes down to that orders of magnitude where, if you've got that really kind of complex pricing logic, you usually just want to make sure that you can pull that into those results like you're seeing here. Versus if we've got that, smaller segments, that can be information that's stored and driven as part of the search experience there. So let's go ahead and move on to the next set of entitlements there, supply constraints. So this is something that we see an awful lot of in the current environment here. Being able to say not only what's available at the particular location that I'm browsing, but also being able to understand what's currently in stock at the pickup branch that I'm currently looking at. There can be a difference between saying, I am looking, I'm shopping the Seattle branch here, but I need to go pick that up today. And so when I have that toggled on as an in-stock pickup at branch, we're then going to go ahead and see the differences in results there. We had 10 previously. Now we're seeing 6 results because we've made that in-stock toggle. This is something else that can be has become kind of more and more of a gap in the industry, where we can see that this is a disconnect in that user experience. You want to make sure that not only are you able to get back in the right results for the visitor, that you're honoring the location that the visitor is shopping at, that you're showing the specific results for that individual visitor, but you also need to then also go that extra step of being able to say, what can they pick up immediately? So let's go ahead and again give you a live site example of what that actually looks like. And again, we're going to stick here on Kirby Risk. And let's actually keep within this search here for sensors, because I think that, we can just kind of really drive home the experience on that. So again, we're looking at this from that Indianapolis distribution center. We're getting those 5,000 results here. I can go ahead and say, well, let me go ahead and show it's only available at this in-stock pickup location. Well, we're going to go down from 5,000 down to just 990. What I think is even more kind of dramatic to drive this point home, though, is that, again, because this is all driven against the location that we're talking about, before we show those 5,000 results, now we're down to 900. If I go ahead and look at kind of the total results again, let's go ahead and remove that in-stock toggle. You can see here again that we go back up to our 5,000. Let's go ahead and change our location again now. Let's just show you kind of the differences in experiences there, where we had those 5,000 down to 900. But again, if we go to this Fort Wayne location, the Allen Bradley brand is no longer available here at this, the Allen Bradley vendor is no longer available at this location. So we now have gone down to 592 results. Well, you need to understand then what's the in-stock pickup location or in-stock pickup information at this location. So if I toggle this on, we've now gone from 500 results now down just to 10. So it really is understanding that complexity. And this can be something that can be very dynamic. This can be something that is changing minute by minute. This can be something that's changing, hour by hour. It really comes down to, how do you want to drive this experience? We've seen use cases where businesses are communicating that information to us in real time, saying, this item sold, this other item sold. Oh, we just got in a shipment. These have been returned. So we're at kind of getting more constant updates of inventory. We've also seen where we're doing more kind of generic, it's under a certain threshold or it's over a certain threshold to drive those in-stock pickup at branch locations. So a number of different ways to kind of approach and solve for that information and make sure that you are kind of driving the best experience. So there's lots that we've covered here today. We've gone ahead and tackled the customer entitlements. We've tackled customer entitlements as it relates to pricing groups. We've tackled it from location. We've tackled it from logging in. We've shown you lots of information around recommendations and how you can leverage the different strategies of the wisdom of the crowd, the wisdom of the content, and the wisdom of you to increase those average order values. And we, of course, walked through the differences and making sure you get the right information in front of your visitors as it relates to unit of measurement searching and also Facet Navigation functionality. So I'm going to go ahead and pass this back over to Jim here. I think we might have some Q&A that we want to tackle.
Yeah, we sure do, Jonathan. Thanks. That was great. And I love the examples he had of both the electrical distributors and how they might use it, and also some of your experiences from some other industries. I think that's a very powerful way to look at the tools that you're offering here at Bridgeline. I had a question here at the bottom of our list from Jim Nowakowski. He says, he's with an ad agency, says, why would you show recently viewed items to someone and not knowing if they purchased it or moved on without purchasing it possibly? Is that ever an issue?
So that's actually a good question there. From recently viewed items, it can be filtered against other criteria. In the B2B space, though, kind of specifically, we do see a lot of that. I'm repurchasing items. I'm coming back to the site to buy the same thing that I always buy. So using something like a recently viewed can be a good way to kind of short circuit that or shortcut that, I should say, not short circuit. I've got electrical on the brain here, but be able to go directly to that and say, understanding that the visitor has been to the site previously, what have they recently looked at, what have they previously purchased, and using those to make those suggestions. Now, if you're in an industry where if someone's bought that once, the classic example that everyone always jokes about is, I went to Amazon and I bought a vacuum, and then the next time I go to Amazon, they're showing me 12 more vacuums. Well, I don't need another vacuum. The cool thing that we can do on our end is we can take those signals and say, okay, they have bought this. We don't need to show them that anymore. Let's show them the accessories for that. Let's show them the things that they're going to need to replace, the gaskets and the bags and the things that might go along with that.
All right. Let's see. We have quite a few questions here.
We do.
Yeah. When I just, as we were going through, I had one myself. I was thinking, have you ever seen in any of the fields? And you talk a lot about wisdom of the crowd, wisdom of the content, wisdom of the catalog. Mm-hmm. Is there ever within a specific niche, did you ever have any type of thing where there might be some industry specifications on how the product may be lined up? Maybe it's a military spec. In the electrical business, we have the idea group where there's 27 buckets of data that they have, and maybe not all of them are something you're going to need to show in this type of a format. How do you work with that?
Yeah, no, that's there are industry specific pains that we need to think about when it comes to how that all works. And that's, I think, one of the things that speaks to our strengths, not to get too salesy here, but from our end, we do work in a lot of different industries. And so we have a lot of experience of understanding the differences of the needs of the electrical market versus, a higher education facility or someone who's selling, clothing. There's different pain points there. There's different data. And one of the things that I think that we have really, one of the reasons why we were able to do this kind of a presentation and talk about the pain points and talk about the gaps that we commonly see is because we've worked so well in this electrical market that we understand those unique challenges. And so some of those can be just the complexity of the data. The catalog of electrical distribution is so much more complex than than a t-shirt. It's got you're talking even just like wiring. It's what's the gauge of that wire, what's the voltage of it, all the different values that go along with that. But the thing that kind of, I think the reason why we like working in this space, why we've had such good successes in it, is that that's a lot of good information. You can do a lot with that. There's a lot of different things that can drive those relationships and can really kind of help inform the answers and the suggestions that we're making from a search perspective, from a recommendations perspective. The more data we can get, the happier we are as a company. So we love working in this space. But you're 100% correct. There are a lot of challenges that happen with those changes in data.
Yeah. Well, how about the size of a company that might utilize your search information tool, SIM? Do you have to be big, or is it fit for companies of many different sizes?
Yeah. So from our end, we don't really have a guideline on you need to be X number big before we start to make those suggestions. Obviously, the real limitation, if we want to get into the limitations, not one that we commonly run into in the electrical distribution space. It's the size of the catalog. It's if you only have a few hundred products, like we're talking 100, 125, 150. Again, we go back to that answer that we just talked about. It's the data. If you've only got that small amount of catalog, well, there's not a lot that search is really going to drive for you there. It's such a small catalog. There's not going to be a lot of kind of pieces of data for us to work with. And so on our end, it's really not the size of the company. That's actually one of our kind of behind the scenes kind of mission statements, is to try and get these kind of more advanced features into, everyone's hands. You start thinking about things like, personalization and driving those kind of wisdom of the content recommendations. Those are things that you usually think about with like the Amazons of the world, of like, oh, hey, it is, using that information to drive those suggestions. So there's not really a particular size company. It really comes down to kind of the catalog that we're talking about. And for that, I would say usually once we get into like 500 and above is where we really start to see the benefits start to play out.
Okay. Yeah. Got a question here from the Reynolds company down in Texas from Leslie Bell. She says, for entitlements, our users access pricing, inventory, or Allen Bradley based on fields in SX.E, which I believe is an Infor ERP system. What other customizations could entitlements be used? Could it be products purchased in a specific area?
100%. That is one of the hallmarks of the functionality there. Is that entitlement is being able to say, we know what is available at this location. We know what is popular at this location. So think about that example that we're going to walk through of the Fort Wayne location versus Indianapolis. We're talking a massive difference in catalog there. And so when we're thinking about, well, in the Indianapolis distribution center, they've got 5,000 products that are available for that one search
Mhm.
versus Fort Wayne where it's 500. So what's important about that distinction there is being able to use that location and then say, okay, well, we can power all of the other function that we just talked about, well, what's actually popular at that location? What are the wisdom of the crowd, basically? What are visitors engaging with and converting off of? So using those signals at a location-based experience is really kind of the next step on that. Okay, well, if we
Mhm.
can make sure that we're showing the right
Mhm.
items, that's a big part of it. But then
Mhm.
what do we do with that information? What are visitors at Fort Wayne
Yeah.
interacting with differently than Indianapolis because they've got such a smaller set of
Mhm.
catalog to work
Mhm.
through?
Yeah.
Um, that's a great
Yeah.
question because that is exactly
Yeah.
what we're trying to solve for.
Yeah. Got a question here from about the lighting industry, specific to a distributor of lighting products. How would you see the benefits of machine learning and AI in the lighting world?
So that's lighting is another kind of interesting, obviously an offshoot there of the electrical distribution, but where
Mhm.
we see that is in the relationship of they're all kind of like a part system. Everything's kind of built
Mhm.
into, if I'm
Mhm.
buying this ballast, well, then I need these particular bulbs that will go in, and I need this
Mhm.
particular wiring, and
Mhm.
so it has that good relationship kind of
Mhm.
functionality. There's also a lot of kind of repeat purchasing in that. So again, that idea of leveraging machine learning to understand here what other visitors are looking at, that AI to say here's what actually you as an individual are looking to repurchase probably because you just bought out all of these other ballasts to put into a warehouse. So making those suggestions out, we know you're going to need these bulbs when you come back here. It uses that same kind of relationship data that we're talking about. It's just a different spin on the examples that we just provided here.
Yeah. One of the things I'm always amazed about in the lighting field is just how many manufacturers' lines a lighting company may have access to. Sometimes it might be the rep and they represent, they may or may not be stocking those, but boy, there's a lot. There are, despite the consolidation, there are a lot of vendors out there with lots of SKUs and all the resulting data that you mentioned. And how do you, the
Definitely,
cross-referencing all must
different
be it.
lengths, different styles,
Yeah.
different wattage, different. It's a
Yeah.
super complex thing.
Mhm.
And when you come to it from the B2B space, there's
Mhm.
always the other thing you need to keep in mind is primarily your visitors are probably going to know what they're looking for. So
Mhm.
doing a lot of part number searches, doing a
Mhm.
lot of very specific, long tail keyword based searches
Yeah.
to find
Okay.
specifically what they're looking
Sure.
for. But
Mhm.
you're also going to have those people who, just got hired onto the company and they're kind of their
Yeah.
first time on there. So you
Mhm.
need to make sure that you're kind of, I guess, kind of a bonus takeaway, I guess you could say, from the
Mhm.
Q&A here is you don't want to you don't want to ignore
Mhm.
first time visitors or being able to
Mhm.
provide good informational
Mhm.
experiences for those visitors. If I just got hired on this company and I'm
Mhm.
trying to make a good impression and I can come to your site and I can use your information to get to the right products that I'm looking for as
Mhm.
I'm learning this experience, you have a customer for life then because they'll know this is
Mhm.
who I want to. They've got the right information. It's not just a commerce experience. So we see that kind of becoming more and more important in just kind of like all of the B2B spaces is not just focusing on the commerce experience, but really getting into leveraging, blog posts, knowledge and information, highlighting those PDFs, those
Mhm.
specification sheets, those MDS sheets, making sure that that kind of ancillary information is just as easily able to be found as the actual products themselves.
Mhm. Great. Just got, I think, about two more questions we have here.
Excellent.
It's another one from Jim Nowakowski with Interline Creative Group. He says,
Oh,
what about shipping from the one location to another when the choice, when product isn't available where you want it? Is that possible? I guess if you're saying, hey, not available at where you normally shop, but can you get it from another one? And is that something you're seeing companies ask for, that capability? Yeah.
so from our perspective, from the search perspective, and returning in those results, it really is again just another data
Mm-hmm.
aspect to say
Yeah.
what do we want to actually
Yeah.
display? How do you as a business want to display that information, and do you have the data to let us communicate that to them? So we definitely have seen that as a use case where this might be out of stock here, but we have it available in a warehouse just
Mm-hmm.
down the road or the
Yeah.
next city over, and so we can get that over
Mm-hmm.
to you. On our end, if we
Yeah.
have access to that information, we can display that as a not available near location, but it is available at these other locations or can be delivered to that location. We can
Mm-hmm.
even use that as an influence on the results themselves to say, well, items that are currently available, let's make sure those are the first things that are visible. Items that can be delivered from an adjoining warehouse within the next day or two, those can be the
Mm-hmm.
second set of results that are available. And the items that are just not currently available or would require longer would be at the bottom of those results. So you want to take those signals and use that not just as a, oh hey, we can do this, but make sure that you're also keeping an eye on, how can we make this a good experience for the visitor, not just, oh, well, this
Yeah.
result, the first result is something that is in stock. The second result is something
Yeah.
that would take, time to be delivered, but really going ahead and using that to say, let's get the information in the right order for that visitor.
Mhm. Yeah. And I've got one last question for you here. And this is something I know a lot of distributors, not only electrical, but all over, looking at Amazon supply. They have a lot of the same products available. But maybe it could be a bit more of a challenge for a company that has maybe a smaller selection, maybe only 500 products up. What kind of tips do you have for how they can beat Amazon when specific to search engine optimization? You certainly have a lot of the tools that I think can help them do that, but any particular things, any parting thoughts on that when it comes to specifically competing on Amazon on a search type of basis?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because that's something that I think in the B2B space we sometimes lose track of SEO. It's like, oh, I've got my set of customers. It's just my little wheelhouse. No one's really going to Google and searching for my product, and they're all coming right to my site. But again, you got to think about those. How do you expand your customer group? How do you get those visitors who, again, new to the company, things like that? Discoverability is still going to be an important part of that, and SEO is, of course, always kind of paramount to that.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because there is actually a couple of different ways that we approach helping out from an SEO perspective, as you mentioned, as we've talked about a couple of different times now. All of the data that we have access to, the attributes around that product catalog, we can use those to help build out a more dynamic kind of landing pages, category pages, examples of, like, hey, here's our newly in stock filtered against a particular brand, and building out a sitemap then so that Google can understand the content that's on there a lot better than just kind of, throwing it up there and hoping that, the Google crawler gets through it the way that you would want it to. So we use the information that we have around your product catalog, along with the facets and filters that are being built out, to build out a more dynamic sitemap to say, if I'm looking for, a 2-ounce, glass jar in straight-sided, made, in amber color. So I go to Google and I say, I'm looking for a 2-ounce amber glass straight-sided jar. Well, we can help them understand that you have a straight-sided jar page that has glass as a material and has 2 ounces as an option. So that when the visitor finds that page, they click onto that, they're pulled right into a results page that has those 2 ounces already selected, has the glass already selected, and they have the obviously the other relevant products to that category returned. And then again, you can layer in all of those other issues of, well, we know that from their IP that they're in the Seattle area, so we're going to filter that against the Seattle warehouse, so they're only seeing, it just gets. That's the one fun thing about this space, is it can be really complex, and there's lots of different ways that we can segment that data. But from an SEO perspective, to answer the specific question, we can take advantage of all those facets to build out a good site map.
It would certainly seem, knowing a bit about how Amazon works in this, they very broad, what they say, it's like the Missouri River a mile wide, but maybe only an inch or two deep, where you're helping distributors that are maybe, in the big scheme of things, maybe a little narrow in scope, but miles deep. And you certainly have the tools for that. And you've already established some pasture with some of the companies you work for. You mentioned Crescent, you mentioned Curb Risk. I know there's been others, and I urge any of our listeners today on the Hawk Search website. They've got some great case studies on there, just some more details on some of the things that you've done for those electrical distributors. Some great information that we don't really have the time to unfortunately get into today. But I think Jonathan did a great job here, more than hitting the highlights. I think he got some good talking points here that I think is going to be very valuable for anyone that's looking to take another good look at their website, how to improve the discoverability. I learned a couple of things: discoverability, wisdom of the crowd, wisdom of content, a couple of good terms and all this that I think resonate with our audience. And I think we're pretty much run out of time here. As I mentioned, if you are thinking of a question that didn't get a chance to answer it here, you can certainly email us, and we will get that in front of Jonathan and his team there at Bridgeline and Hawk Search. I'd like to thank the folks there at Bridgeline for sponsoring the webinar today, and for Jonathan's time. He certainly, I've certainly learned a lot on this. Gave me some ideas for some possible articles in the magazine coming up.
There we go.
I'd like to thank him for sponsoring. I'd like to thank all of you for joining, and please have a great rest of the day. I appreciate your time today.
Jim, thank you very much. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, Jonathan.